The woman who always fed the stray cat had an accident on the roadside. What the cat did next stunned everyone watching. Eleanor Ainsworth lived a life governed by the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in her hallway. Her home, a modest two-story clapboard house on Maple Street in Havenwood, Ohio, was a repository of quiet memories and the faint scent of lavender and old books. Havenwood was the kind of town where people still waved from their porches, and the local diner, the Cozy Corner, was the social hub. But Eleanor mostly kept to herself. She was 82, her once vibrant auburn hair now a soft, silvery white, usually pulled back in a neat bun. Her hands, gnarled with age and the ghosts of arthritis, still moved with a practiced grace as she tended to her small garden or prepared her simple meals. Every morning, after a breakfast of oatmeal and weak tea, Eleanor would perform a ritual that had become the highlight of her day. She'd carefully scoop a portion of cooked rice, sometimes mixed with a bit of leftover chicken or fish, into a chipped ceramic bowl. Then, she'd step out on her back porch, the wooden steps creaking softly under her weight, and place the bowl near the overgrown lilac bush. Rusty, she called her voice a little raspy but kind. Breakfast time, almost always within moments, a flash of orange fur would emerge from the tangle of undergrowth at the edge of her yard. Rusty was a stray, a large tomcat with a torn ear and a coat the color of a setting sun. He was wary of everyone else in Havenwood, but he developed a cautious trust with Eleanor. He'd approach the bowl slowly, his green eyes fixed on her, and eat with a delicate, almost finicky, manner that belied his street-smart origins. Eleanor never tried to touch him. She knew he wouldn't allow it. Their relationship was built on a respectful distance, a silent understanding between two solitary souls. She talked to him softly while he ate, telling him about the weather, the news she'd heard on the radio, or the progress of her tomato plants. It was a one-sided conversation, of course, but it filled the silence of her days. The loneliness, however, was always there, a subtle ache beneath the surface of her routine. Her husband, George, had passed away 10 years prior, leaving a void that no amount of gardening or crossword puzzles could fill. Their only child, a daughter named Sarah, had moved to California decades ago, chasing dreams that had seemingly led her far away from Havenwood and her mother. They spoke on the phone, occasionally brief, strained conversations that left Eleanor feeling more isolated than ever. But the real source of her heartache was her nephew, David. He was Sarah's son, and Eleanor had practically raised him after Sarah's tumultuous early years. David had been a bright, charming boy, but something had shifted in him as he grew older. Greed, perhaps, or a sense of entitlement, had taken root. When Eleanor's brother, David's grandfather, had passed away, leaving a sizable inheritance, a bitter dispute had erupted over the family's small apple orchard. David, fueled by a sense of injustice, real or imagined, had accused Eleanor of manipulating the will. The legal battle had been ugly and protracted, leaving deep scars on both sides. In the end, David had won a portion of the orchard, but the victory had cost him his relationship with his grandmother. He hadn't spoken to her in 5 years. Eleanor often wondered if she'd done something wrong, if she could have somehow prevented the rift. She replayed old memories, searching for clues, for moments where she might have failed him. The guilt and the regret were a constant, low-humming burden. The only solace she found was in the simple act of feeding Rusty. It was a small thing, a tiny act of kindness in a world that often felt cold and indifferent. It was a connection, however tenuous, to another living being. And in the quiet mornings, as she watched the orange cat eat his rice, Eleanor felt a flicker of warmth in the vast emptiness of her life. She would often stare out into the distance, watching the road. Sometimes she imagined a car pulling up, David stepping out, a look of remorse on his face. But it was always just a fantasy. The road remained empty, except for the occasional passing vehicle, a reminder of the life that flowed on, seemingly without her. She continued to feed the cat, Rusty, day in and day out. The rhythm was steady. The rain came down in sheets, blurring the world into a hazy watercolor of grays and greens. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late October, and Eleanor had walked to the small grocery store on the edge of town to pick up a few essentials. She preferred walking, even in the rain. It was good exercise, and it gave her a chance to observe the changing seasons. The leaves of the maple trees lining Main Street were a riot of crimson and gold, clinging desperately to their branches against the onslaught of the wind. As she walked back, her canvas bag heavy with groceries, she noticed a car speeding down the road, its headlights cutting through the gloom. It was approaching a curve too fast, she thought, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. She instinctively stepped closer to the edge of the sidewalk, hugging the overgrown hedge that bordered the property. Then, everything happened at once. The car, a dark-colored sedan, lost control on the wet pavement. It swerved violently, its tires screeching in protest, and jumped the curb. Eleanor saw it coming, a terrifying metal beast bearing down on her, but she was too slow to react. She felt a searing pain in her side, a crushing force that threw her to the ground. The groceries scattered, cans rolling across the sidewalk, a carton of eggs splattering against the brick wall of a nearby house. Then, darkness. The driver, his face pale and contorted with panic, looked in his rearview mirror. He saw the elderly woman lying motionless on the ground, the rain washing over her. He hesitated for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew he should stop, call for help. But fear, cold and paralyzing, gripped him. He thought of the consequences, the legal ramifications, the potential ruin of his life. He gunned the engine, the tires spinning on the wet pavement, and sped away, leaving Eleanor alone in the gathering dusk. From somewhere in the shadows, Rusty emerged. He'd been sheltering under the porch of the house across the street, watching Eleanor with his usual cautious curiosity. He'd seen the car, the impact, the woman falling. Now, he crept forward, his body low to the ground, his senses on high alert. He sniffed the air, his whiskers twitching, picking up the scent of blood and fear. He saw Eleanor lying still, her eyes closed, her breathing shallow. An instinct, primal and powerful, surged through him. He darted out into the road, his orange fur a bright beacon in the fading light. He stood directly in the path of oncoming traffic, his tail lashing, and let out a series of ear-splitting yowls, a desperate plea for help. A delivery van, driven by a young man named Mark Olson, was approaching the scene. Mark was behind schedule, stressed about meeting his quota, and his mind was on anything but stray cats. But the sight of Rusty, standing defiantly in the middle of the road, his fur plastered to his body by the rain, made him slam on the brakes. "What the heck?" Mark muttered, peering through the rain-streaked windshield. He thought the cat was injured, perhaps hit by a car. He couldn't just leave it there. He got out of the van, cautiously approaching Rusty. The cat didn't run. Instead, he kept yowling, looking back towards the side of the road. Mark followed his gaze, and that's when he saw her. Eleanor was lying in a crumpled heap near the hedge, her face pale and bloodied. Mark's stomach dropped. He rushed to her side, checking for a pulse. It was weak, but it was there. "Oh my God," he whispered. He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking, and dialed 911. "I need an ambulance," he shouted into the phone. "There's been an accident. An elderly woman, she's been hit by a car. I'm on Main Street, near Elm Hurry." While he waited for the ambulance, Mark did what he could to make Eleanor comfortable. He took off his jacket and covered her, trying to shield her from the rain. Rusty stayed close, watching Mark with wary eyes, occasionally nudging Eleanor's hand with his head. The sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Mark felt a surge of relief. He didn't know if Eleanor would survive, but he'd done what he could. He'd stopped. He'd called for help. And it was all thanks to a stray cat, a creature he'd almost dismissed as a nuisance. The local newspaper, the Havenwood Herald, ran a front-page story about the accident the next day. The headline read, "Hero Cat Saves Elderly Woman from Hit-and-Run Driver." The story recounted Mark's account of the rescue, highlighting Rusty's bravery and quick thinking. The town was abuzz with the news. Everyone was talking about the mysterious orange cat and the woman he'd saved. But no one, except for Mark, knew who the woman was. She remained unidentified in the hospital, listed in critical but stable condition. Rusty became a symbol of hope that even the smallest among us can rise and become heroes. Officer Daniel Carter, a veteran of the Havenwood Police Department, was assigned to the hit-and-run case. Carter was a man of quiet competence and unwavering integrity, with a weathered face that reflected years of dealing with the best and worst of humanity. He'd seen his share of tragedies in Havenwood, but this case struck a particular chord with him. The thought of an elderly woman left to die on the side of the road, and the image of the stray cat braving traffic to save her, stirred something deep within him. The first step was to identify the victim. Carter visited Eleanor in the hospital, but she was still unconscious, hooked up to machines that beeped and whirred, monitoring her fragile life. He spoke to the nurses, hoping to find some clue to her identity. She had no ID on her. A young nurse, Sarah Miller, told him, "Just a grocery bag with a few items." "We found a receipt from Miller's grocery, though." Carter went to Miller's grocery, showing the receipt to the cashier, a friendly woman named Betty. Betty recognized the items immediately. "Oh, that's Mrs. Ainsworth," she said. "She comes in every Tuesday. Such a sweet lady. Always buy the same things." Finally, Carter had a name. He ran a check on Eleanor Ainsworth and found her address on Maple Street. He drove to her house, noticing the neatly kept garden and the bowl of rice on the back porch, now untouched. He interviewed neighbors, piecing together a picture of Eleanor's life, her quiet routine, her estrangement from her family, her kindness to the stray cat. Meanwhile, the forensics team was examining the security camera footage from a nearby business that had captured a partial view of the accident. The video quality was poor, grainy, and distorted by the rain, but they were able to enhance the image enough to get a partial license plate number of the fleeing vehicle. Carter ran the partial plate through the system, and it came back with a match. The car was registered to David Miller, residing in an address on the outskirts of Havenwood, the apple orchard. Carter's gut clenched. He knew the name. He'd heard the whispers around town about the bitter family feud. He knew David Miller was Eleanor Ainsworth's nephew. Carter drove to the orchard, his mind racing. He found David working in one of the barns, repairing a piece of farm equipment. David was a tall, muscular man in his late 30s, with a hardened look in his eyes. He seemed surprised to see Carter, but not overly concerned. "Officer Carter," he said, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. "What can I do for you?" Carter got straight to the point. "We're investigating a hit-and-run accident that occurred yesterday on Main Street. An elderly woman was seriously injured. We have reason to believe the vehicle involved was yours." David's expression didn't change. "My car? That's impossible. I was here all day." "We have security camera footage," Carter said, his voice steady. "It shows a car matching the description of yours, with a partial license plate that matches yours, leaving the scene of the accident." David scoffed. "Coincidence? Plenty of cars look like mine." "The victim," Carter continued, watching David closely, "was identified as Eleanor Ainsworth, your grandmother." A flicker of something, guilt, fear, recognition crossed David's face, but it was gone in an instant. He maintained his composure, his voice hardening. "I haven't seen my grandmother in years," he said. "We're not on speaking terms. I had nothing to do with this." Carter knew David was lying. He could see it in his eyes, in the subtle tremor of his hands. But he needed more than a hunch. He needed proof. "We're going to need to examine your car, Mr. Miller," Carter said, "and I'd like you to come down to the station for further questioning." The police impound David's car. After careful examination, they find traces of blood. After the test, the blood belongs to Eleanor. David broke his silence and told all the truth. He hated his grandmother, but the car accident was not intentional. It was purely an accident. He admits he ran away. He knew it was his grandmother. Eleanor drifted in and out of consciousness for days. She had fleeting images of bright lights, blurry faces, and the persistent, comforting sound of the cat's purr. When she finally awoke, fully lucid and aware, she was in a private room at Havenwood General Hospital. Her body ached, her head throbbed, and her left side was wrapped in bandages. A kind, middle-aged nurse named Susan was checking her vitals. "Well, hello there, Mrs. Ainsworth," Susan said with a warm smile. "You gave us quite a scare. You're lucky to be alive." Eleanor tried to speak, but her voice was weak and raspy. "Water," she managed to croak. Susan helped her sip some water through a straw. "You've been through a lot," she said gently. "You were hit by a car. A hit and run. But you're going to be okay." Eleanor's mind slowly began to piece together the fragments of memory. The rain, the speeding car, the searing pain, and then nothing. She remembered Rusty, his orange fur, his insistent meows. "The cat," she whispered. Did he?" "Oh, the cat," Susan exclaimed, her eyes lighting up. "He's a hero, Mrs. Ainsworth. He saved your life. He ran into the road and stopped traffic. A delivery driver found you thanks to him. The whole town's talking about it." A wave of relief washed over Eleanor. Rusty was safe, and he had saved her. The thought filled her with a warmth that eased the physical pain. Over the next few days, Eleanor slowly regained her strength. She learned the details of the accident, the extent of her injuries, a broken hip, several fractured ribs, and a concussion, and the ongoing police investigation. Officer Carter visited her regularly, updating her on the progress of the case. He was careful not to reveal the identity of the suspect, but Eleanor, with her sharp intuition, sensed something was amiss. "Mrs. Ainsworth," he began, "we've made an arrest in the hit-and-run case. We have sufficient evidence to charge the driver." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The driver was David Miller, your nephew." Eleanor closed her eyes, a wave of sadness washing over her. It wasn't a surprise, not really. She'd felt it in her gut, a deep, unsettling premonition. But hearing it confirmed, spoken aloud, still brought a fresh wave of pain. It was the final, crushing blow to a relationship that had already been shattered. "You knew it was me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Carter nodded. "Yes, ma'am. He admitted to seeing you, but he panicked and fled the scene." Eleanor remained silent for a long time, staring out the window at the falling leaves. The world outside seemed to mirror the turmoil within her. The vibrant colors of autumn, now fading, were a reminder of the passage of time, the inevitability of loss and decay. "What will happen to him?" she finally asked. "That depends in part on you, Mrs. Ainsworth," Carter said. "You have the right to press charges. He could face serious jail time." The decision weighed heavily on Eleanor. She thought of David as a boy, the bright, mischievous child she'd adored. She remembered his laughter, his playful spirit, the bond they'd once shared. But she also remembered the bitterness, the greed, the accusations that had driven them apart. And now this. He had left her for dead on the side of the road. She thought of George, her late husband. He would have wanted justice, she knew. He would have been furious at David, would have demanded he be punished to the full extent of the law. But Eleanor wasn't George. She'd always been the softer one, the peacemaker. She thought of Rusty, the loyal stray who had risked his life for her. He had shown her the true meaning of unconditional love, of selfless devotion. Could she, in turn, show a measure of compassion, even to someone who had wronged her so deeply? The nurse, Susan, had become a quiet confidant during Eleanor's stay. She listened patiently to Eleanor's stories, her regrets, her unspoken fears. She'd seen the tears Eleanor had shed, the silent battles she'd fought within herself. "It's your decision, Mrs. Ainsworth," Susan said gently. "No one can tell you what to do. But whatever you decide, you need to do it for yourself, for your own peace of mind." Eleanor looked at Susan, her eyes filled with a quiet determination. "I don't want to press charges," she said, her voice surprisingly firm. Carter, who had been waiting patiently, was taken aback. "Are you sure, Mrs. Ainsworth? He committed a serious crime. He needs to be held accountable." "He is accountable," Eleanor said. "He has to live with what he's done. That's punishment enough. I don't want any more anger, any more bitterness. I just want peace." Carter respected her decision, although he didn't fully understand it. He knew that David was getting away with a crime, but he also knew that Eleanor's wishes had to be honored. The news of Eleanor's decision spread quickly through Havenwood. Some people were outraged, calling it a miscarriage of justice. Others were moved by her compassion, seeing it as an act of extraordinary grace. The story even made it into the regional newspapers, with headlines like "Grandmother Forgives Hit-and-Run Nephew" and "Act of Mercy Stuns Small Town." The community rallied around Eleanor. Flowers, cards, and gifts poured into her hospital room. People she barely knew stopped by to offer their support, their admiration, their stories of Rusty's heroism. The Cozy Corner Diner organized a fundraiser to help with her medical expenses. Even Sarah, Eleanor's estranged daughter, called from California, her voice choked with emotion. They talked for a long time, a tentative first step towards reconciliation. But the one visitor Eleanor longed for never came. David never reached out, never apologized, never showed any sign of remorse. He was released from custody, the charges dropped, but he remained a pariah in Havenwood, shunned by the community that had once embraced him. The day Eleanor was discharged from the hospital was crisp and sunny, the air filled with the scent of burning leaves. She'd expected to be driven home by Officer Carter or perhaps one of the kind volunteers from the community. But as she stepped out of the hospital doors, leaning on a cane, she saw a familiar sight waiting for her at the curb. Rusty. He was sitting patiently near the entrance, his orange fur gleaming in the sunlight, his green eyes fixed on her. He let out a soft meow, a greeting, a welcome home. Eleanor's heart swelled with emotion. Tears welled up in her eyes, tears not of sadness, but of gratitude, of love, of a profound sense of connection. She slowly made her way to him, her steps unsteady but determined. "Oh, Rusty," she whispered, bending down with difficulty to stroke his head. This time, he didn't shy away. He leaned in her touch, purring loudly, his body vibrating with contentment. It was Mark, the delivery driver, who had arranged it. He'd been keeping an eye on Rusty, making sure he was fed and safe while Eleanor was in the hospital. He'd known how much the cat meant to her. "He's been waiting for you," Mark said with a smile. "I figured you'd want to go home together." Eleanor rode home with Mark, Rusty curled up on her lap, purring contentedly. As they drove through Havenwood, she saw signs of the community's support everywhere. "Welcome home, Eleanor." Banners hung from storefronts. People waved from their porches, calling out their good wishes. When they arrived at her house on Maple Street, she found her front yard transformed. Neighbors had cleaned up her garden, planted new flowers, and even repaired the creaky steps on her porch. A welcome home basket filled with goodies sat on her doorstep. Life after the accident was different for Eleanor. She was physically weaker, and she had to rely on a cane to get around. But she was also stronger in spirit, more open to the world, more connected to the people around her. The experience had changed her, stripping away the layers of loneliness and regret that had accumulated over the years. She continued to feed Rusty, of course. Their bond was deeper now, unbreakable. He followed her everywhere, sleeping at the foot of her bed, keeping her company during her quiet evenings. He was her protector, her companion, her furry guardian angel. The community embraced Eleanor as a local hero, a symbol of resilience and forgiveness. She became a regular at the Cozy Corner Diner, sharing stories and laughter with the other patrons. She even started volunteering at the local animal shelter, inspired by Rusty's selfless act. Sarah came to visit, staying for several weeks. They talked, they cried, they began to heal the wounds of the past. Sarah admitted her mistakes, her selfishness, her regret at having stayed away for so long. Eleanor forgave her, understanding the complexities of family relationships, the pressures that can drive people apart. David, however, remained a distant figure. Eleanor heard through the grapevine that he'd sold the apple orchard and moved away, seeking a fresh start somewhere else. She wished him well, in her heart, but she knew that some bridges could never be fully rebuilt. One sunny afternoon, several months after the accident, Eleanor was sitting on her porch, watching Rusty chase butterflies in the garden. She felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The loneliness was still there, a faint echo of the past, but it was no longer the defining force of her life. She had found a new rhythm, a new purpose. She had learned the power of forgiveness, the healing balm of community, and the enduring strength of the bonds that connect us, even in the face of adversity. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that the unexpected friendship with a stray orange cat had saved her, not just from a speeding car, but from a life of quiet despair. The cat, a silent, furry companion, had shown her the way back to the light, back to the simple joys of living, back to the enduring power of love. And that, she realized, was a gift more precious than any fortune. The cat was a representation of love and forgiveness.